If you're into retro gaming, then you already know about the charm of a CRT. The glow, the scan lines, the way that the games used to look. A CRT is a must if you really care about the roots of retro gaming. And a device actually just hit the market that gives you all of this, but in your pocket. Right in front of you is Anbernic's new RG477M, and on the surface, it might look just like another premium retro handheld. But the second you turn it on, you'll realize that something is slightly different. This thing wasn't just made to run retro games, but instead made to feel like the era that they came from. Until about the mid-2000s, basically every single TV was developed and designed with 4x3 CRT TVs in mind. These TVs and their weird quirks weren't only the default, but instead they were actually a part of the experience. The scan lines, the glow, the way that the pixels snapped into place, everything was finely tuned and developed with this in mind. And of course, that super loud ear-piercing noise whenever you turn it on. But then the kryptonite of this beautiful CRT goodness had arrived, and its name was HD. It felt like the Xbox 360 and the PS3 showed up overnight, and then all of a sudden, everybody and their moms just wanted to buy a widescreen TV and didn't want to lug around like this 50-pound CRT TV. Like, look at me. I literally found this TV for free the other day, and I drove an hour and a half to go and pick it up, and it literally ruined my car. But it was free, so it was worth it. Whenever HD TVs hit the market, it felt like everything had to be labeled with HD, even if it wasn't a freaking TV. HD Vision wraparounds, HD Vision visors, HD antennas. There was even makeup brands that were designing and creating products that had HD in the marketing. Do you own any HD makeup products?
No.
This is why we're married. This trend was exactly like AI in modern times. Why is there AI in my washing machine? Emulating these 16:9 consoles and systems is kind of a disaster. And while it has been growing and been developing at an alarming rate, it's still not the best system or the best thing to emulate because you're gonna run into so many issues. Which is exactly why, my friends, we all must congregate and form an alliance to support the greatest aspect ratio of all time, 4x3. There's just so many retro systems that are 4x3 and were designed with this aspect ratio in mind. NES, SNES, N64, PS1, most of GameCube and PS2, even though those things did have widescreen versions in certain games, almost every single release was particularly made for 4x3 consoles. And if you take a look at all of these high-end retro handhelds, they're all 16:9. So you're really not getting the best experience here. Now, for most people who aren't absolute freaks like myself, stuck inside all day, thinking about CRTs and aspect ratios and why I have no friends, these are fine. You're not gonna have a problem if you actually get these high-end retro devices. But if you are like me and you wanna push the boundaries as far as they can go, then this just isn't enough. I'm not looking for a good experience with these retro games. I'm looking for the best experience. I want to make it feel like I'm sitting in my room, listening to that high-pitched CRT noise again, and I'm staring at my screen like a 4 or 6-year-old playing like Mario Strikers, and my mom is coming in the room telling me that my dad is leaving and they're getting a divorce and it's all just crap. And we just got word that another Anbernic device, of course, has hit the market, and I think it's trying to replicate a CRT. The first thing we gotta talk about here is the star of the show, and that is the screen. This is the bread and butter of the entire package, and it's a 4.7-inch, 4x3, 120 hertz IPS screen, and it is the sole reason why we're able to get so close to that classic retro feel. Because it's rocking that 4x3 aspect ratio, so many of these classic systems are going to look and scale perfectly on here. And we've seen like 4x3 screens before so many times in a lot of cheaper, budget-friendly handhelds, but not like this and not in this size. It's the same screen that was used in the RG Slide that I just made a video about, but that device had, you know, a really weird balance on the top of the screen where it was actually off-center, and then you had these huge bezels on the sides without, you know, proper controls. The ergonomics were just super weird, so it was a great screen, but it felt like it wasn't being utilized properly with the hardware and the actual shell of it. So a lot of people, like myself included, who saw the RG slide took a note of this screen, and we were just hoping that Anbernic would reuse it in a future device. And thankfully, they have. But the screen ratio and the size here is only half the battle if we really want to make this look like a true CRT TV. CRTs don't just look good when standing still, they look incredible. And that's because they don't hold the image on screen like modern LCDs do. Instead, on a true CRT TV, each frame is flashed briefly and then disappears, which means your eyes don't actually blur the motion together when you're tracking something or a pixel or whatever it is on screen. So like on LCDs, the image is held in place until the next frame, and that creates this weird motion blur, especially during fast scrolling or panning, which just makes everything kind of look like a mess. And the RG477M actually has a secret weapon for this, and that is a 120 hertz panel. This lets us use something called black frame insertion, which basically recreates and tries to emulate that CRT style flicker. If you enable this in RetroArch, then that means that every other frame you'll get flashed a black screen, and what that's doing is emulating the exact same impulse-based delivery that a CRT TV uses. However, instead of it just flashing off, it's giving you the black screen instead. And the end result from enabling this just gives you more smoother scrolling, cleaner motion and less blur that looks like a CRT TV, but it's literally in a pocketable handheld. So now we've got a 4x3 screen that isn't just perfectly scaling the games, but thanks to the high refresh rate screen that's pretty rare and unique, especially in this aspect ratio, we're able to clean up the motion clarity and make things look so close to a CRT TV. The only thing we're missing now is literally just a little hint of nostalgia with Scanlines, some bloom, some pixel scaling, and a couple of different artifacts that you would normally get on an old school TV. And we are so blessed, man. We're literally living in like the golden age of retro gaming, because we have developed so much as a community where amazing people and individuals have created what's known as custom shader presets. These are presets and shaders that we can apply in RetroArch that emulate and replicate all of those beautiful nostalgic CRT effects. When I first got into retro handhelds, I didn't really dive too much into shaders because it felt kind of overwhelming and super confusing. And to be honest with you, RetroArch is not the most user-friendly software for somebody who's a beginner, but that's actually kind of great because there's so much that you can do and learn. You just need to take the time. And I'm telling you right now, you have to dive into shaders. It will just increase and transcend your experience with these older games tenfold. Now, most of these really good shaders require a good amount of performance to actually run properly and give you a good visual effect. And that's literally the next secret weapon of the RG477M, is the fact that we've got the power to run a lot of killer shaders on this thing that give you a beautiful CRT shader polish. You can throw on several different high-end shaders, and this thing will barely break a sweat, especially if it's the older systems. And when it comes to more 3D-based retro systems like PS1, you still have the option to use these shaders, and there's definitely a limit here. This isn't the most powerful device that we've ever seen. The combo that I've been using a lot is the CRT Beam mixed in with the CRT Royale shader preset, and these two combined on a 4x3 screen that is this big absolutely blows my mind. So now we've got literally all of the pieces: a proper 4x3 display, a high refresh rate that lets us clean up motion with BFI or the CRT Beam preset, and the horsepower to render in high-end CRT shaders without dropping performance. If you've watched my 3DS videos, you know that I'm a screen snob and I really like the way that my screen looks, and I'm telling you, when you add these shaders, it's insane. I've never played these retro games in a handheld that makes it look this good and then has no bezels. I'm not an absolute expert on CRTs, so I'm sure there's somebody who can absolutely say that this doesn't look anything like a real CRT, but to my monkey brain and my monkey eyes, it looks like a CRT. I don't know how else to put it. But with a great screen comes great responsibility, okay? We need to have proper controls to back up this screen. Otherwise, it's literally all pointless. But thank God, dude, that is not the case. Anbernic, they've done it. They actually gave us some decent controls. They didn't mess anything up too drastic, and it all has come together. The D-pad is massive and buttery smooth. It doesn't fatigue my thumb like other Anbernic models usually do. The face buttons feel awesome, and I love how much they stick out of the shell, which gives them this nice tactile presence. And the analog sticks are super smooth, and they're a lot bigger than the ones that we got on the RG Slide, which makes a huge difference. And there's no cardinal snapping, which has honestly been kind of a hiccup for a lot of Anbernic products. But right now, right here, everything's kind of coming together, man. There's always a debate with these handhelds to put the D-pad on the top or the thumbstick on the top. And honestly, whenever I first saw this device, I kind of wanted the thumbstick to be on the top because I thought I'd be playing more 3D based games or maybe GameCube games like all the time instead of classic retro games. But after messing around with the CRT shaders and BFI, I'm very glad that the D-pad is on top, because with this type of screen, I'm more likely to play older classic retro systems that are a little bit beyond the GameCube. And the build quality here is an absolute flex because Anbernic decided to release this thing with a metal shell. I got this bronze color, which, you know, I feel like I would have preferred the silver color because I think the bronze one kind of looks a little bit like a turd. It doesn't look bad. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. I also don't really like the silver color either. I don't know. I feel like for a metal handheld, it's really cool, but it just, the colors are just off for me. At the end of the day, we're all just a bunch of oversized toddlers buying toys. So I'm just used to everything being super plasticky. But once I got my hands on this, I'm like, oh my God, this isn't a toy anymore. This is a man's handheld. It's a lot heavier, and some people prefer plastic devices because they're lighter and don't fatigue the hands as much. But like, the Steam Deck exists and people don't really complain about that too much. I'm sure that this is going to be fine for most people. If anything, I enjoy the extra weight. It just feels like I'm holding something that is worth the hefty price tag that this is asking. When it comes to specific systems, my favorite so far has been SNES. It just looks ridiculous on this screen. The 4:3 aspect ratio is the perfect canvas for it, and once you throw on that CRT beam plus the Royale combo and the Pixel AA shader, it just fits so dang good. And I'm gonna keep saying this, it really looks like a CRT, man. My eyes are just loving this. I've never seen games look this good from retro systems in a handheld before. Having no bezels just makes everything so much more immersive and easier to get locked into the game, and it makes it feel like I'm not emulating something, but instead playing it the way that it was intended to be made and intended to be played. Genesis and NES are also flawless systems that were running in 4:3, so sprites and pixels look razor sharp. The movement is buttery smooth with the BFI. Slapping on shaders makes everything pop more than ever. And I did say that SNES was my favorite, but dude, I think PS1 actually does take the cake, because with shaders running and we're getting those 3D graphics, and I'm a big sucker for low poly aesthetics and low poly games, so bringing out those details and making it not look super harsh and kind of removing the aliasing a bit on the edges with all of the effects, and you're still playing and getting good performance, it's crazy. So the depth, the contrast, the overall feel here for PS1 is amazing, and this is also a system that I've never seen this look this good in a handheld. GBA, Game Boy, and Game Boy Color also look sick on here, and this is a prime example why so many people love 4:3, and that's because, yes, you do get some slight black bars when you're emulating other systems, but they're a lot more minimal than something that you would get on the 16:9 aspect ratio. Those ones give you massive black bars on the left and right, but when you're emulating these games on 4:3, it's so much smaller. I'm using the CRT beam shader with the GBA preset from the Coco AIO pack. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but this brings out the warmth and the color depth that makes them feel fresh and nostalgic at the same exact time. GameCube and PS2 also run pretty well on here because of that added performance that Anbernic decided to pack into this little handheld. Dolphin and Aether do really well at bringing these games to light. especially with a few tweaks. You can upscale the resolution. So Wind Waker, Shadow of Colossus, Kingdom Hearts, it's all playable and it looks really great. Since this is a bigger device, the thumbstick placement doesn't bother me one bit. So I had no problem using my left thumb to play any type of games on the GameCube or the PS2, and I didn't find it to be too crampy of an experience. But what you don't get here is that CRT shader magic, since you're not using RetroArch to emulate these games. There's no beam glow, there's no scan lines, it's just a raw native look. And while it's upscaled and it does look kind of like a remastered version, you don't get any of that juicy nostalgia that would be packed into the CRT Royale shader pack or anything else with the BFI. I'm using Beacon as my front end, which is so nice because I can add custom OST in the background, and most like front ends don't let you use any menu music, but Beacon, it's so easy to just pick an audio file and it loops it whenever you're browsing through your games. And you know, it wouldn't be an isaacOS video if I didn't talk about the stupid things that you can do that I actually really appreciate about Android handhelds. And I'm talking about using the Kindle app to read different books. You can use this thing and hold it slightly sideways. It doesn't really work the same way, but I mean, you could hold it like a regular device, like you're playing a video game, but instead you're reading your Kindle app. So that's an option if you want to do it. Anki is probably your best bet, and I know a lot of people do use these things to study flashcards. So as always, that's a fantastic experience, and it makes it feel like you're playing a video game. And of course, Android games are just an extra layer of things that you can do and run on this device. So you've got multiple options, and you're not just limited to playing retro games, but of course, playing retro games is exactly what we want to do, and it's a fantastic experience. But like every other handheld released, it is not perfect. It's scarily close to being the endgame device for me when it comes to a retro handheld with these classic retro systems, but we are not in that talking territory yet. There's still a couple of hiccups here and there. The screen, as good as it is for retro games, is just not the most punchy when it comes to color and saturation. And to be fair, I have been very spoiled, and so is this entire community when it comes to OLED devices, because I think our eyes are slowly getting trained to prefer the OLED devices that have deep blacks and extremely vibrant, saturated colors. And then there's a slight issue with two things when it comes to the controls, and they're not deal breakers by any means. I think this is me being nitpicky, but a lot of other people might find it to be a relatively big problem depending on the person. First up, the shoulder buttons are very, very clicky. It's weird because everything about this build feels very premium. The buttons, the D-pad, even the analog sticks feel so smooth. And then whenever you move your fingers up to the shoulder buttons, that is just, the quality feels so lacking in that department just because of how clicky and hollow sounding they are. Another part of me also doesn't really like these thumbsticks. These are like these Switch style thumbsticks, which get thrown on a lot of Anbernic devices and cheaper models. But for me, I think that they just suck. These Switch thumbsticks, man, they remind me of the original Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons. And, you know, I've got trauma with the Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons. Those things are like created in a sewer and come straight out of a dumpster. They're so bad, the stick drift, and then on top of that, the feel just isn't there. And these ones, while they're slightly more grippy, I just don't like the look and the feel of them. And thankfully, this really isn't that much of an issue because you can just take them off. Just to give you an example, I was actually able to take the thumbsticks off of my Flip 2 and then place them on here. And while the colors don't match and it definitely looks uglier, it is a much better feeling experience because I do appreciate and just enjoy playing more games with those style thumbsticks. And thankfully, like I said, there's Etsy shops all over. I'm going to be ordering some that hopefully match the color. And you're going to want to get something that's a little bit more lower profile so that if you put this in your pocket, it doesn't rub or stick or catch on your pocket when you put it and slide it in there. So just be cautious when you are browsing for stuff. And the last thing, and probably the biggest issue with this device that we've already been hearing about across the community with other reviews, is the annoying fan noise that I also have been subject to, and I do not like the way it sounds. When it kicks in, it's a lot more noticeable because it's got a high-end kind of buzzing or hissing sound. Most fans, you know, like especially even a louder device, sometimes people complain about the Steam Deck. When that fan kicks in, yes, it is loud, but it's a lower pitch, so it's not as distracting when you're gaming. But when this fan kicks on, you absolutely recognize it. So no, this is definitely not the end game device yet. I don't know if we'll ever actually get to an end game device because, you know, we're humans, and even if something is leagues better and probably the best thing we've ever held, we're gonna find some type of problem with it. This little metal monster is priced at around $240 right now retail for the lower end RAM option, which, you know, it's pretty expensive. Like, I feel like these handhelds are definitely getting more and more expensive, which is painful, especially if you want to buy multiple different ones. I definitely think that you shouldn't buy multiple handhelds. It's going to come down to the Mini versus the Pocket 5 versus the Flip 2, and those all have very different use cases. And I think this one definitely appeals the most to retro enthusiasts who really want to play those 4x3 systems in a smaller handheld and get a premium feeling build quality with it. And I'm not gonna lie, dude, $220, $240, it's a lot of money to drop on retro handhelds and retro emulation. You've got to really love this stuff, and I hope that you do as much research as you can to figure out really where your interests lie and what games specifically do you want to play. That's the most important question to ask yourself. This is a review unit that I got from Ambernick, so I didn't pay any money for this. I just paid like the import fees, and we are on Ambernick's radar, which is crazy that this channel has grown to this size to where I'm reviewing review units, which I never thought I would get to. And if I didn't have this review unit, spending money and pulling the trigger on any of these devices is just such a hard ask because it's a lot of money, and, you know, we're getting into Steam Deck territory almost for retro games. So that is just a lot to consider here. More than anything, this just feels like a milestone in the retro handheld scene. It's not the dream device, but I think this is a very big step forward towards the dream device, and we're just getting closer and closer. If this was an OLED panel and they fixed the fan, and then on top of that, the shoulder buttons just weren't as clicky, I don't know what else I would say about this thing. I genuinely think this would be like the retro handheld.
I wanna touch the things you feel, I wanna feel the things you touch. I wanna stay right here forever, still I feel that's not enough. I wanna love the things you see, I wanna